Alright, today we're going to be tearing into a Kawasaki Bayou 220. This is a 1991 model, but a lot of the Bayou 220s up until about 1997 are exactly the same. And then even after 97, there's a lot of similarities, probably close enough to base your rebuild off of this video here. First thing we're going to do is pull this top end apart. I've showed you how to do valve adjustments. We've cleaned carburetors, we've pulled rear differentials apart. Now we're going to rebuild the top end. We've got your cylinder head here, got your cam chain, sprocket, and chain down on this side here, runs down into this bottom end. So you don't actually have to pull these caps again to pull this head, but we are going to loosen up these 14mm bolts up top here. First thing we're going to do though is pull this cam chain tensioner. And that comes in from the side here, and it's right there. And what this does is puts pressure on that cam chain so that it doesn't jump a tooth, causing your timing to jump out of place. Now once we have that out, I'll show you that quick. This is a cam chain tensioner here, and you've got it's self-adjusting. The older ones you had to adjust it every once in a while. These are a self-adjusting cam chain tensioners, and so that takes the tension off of the cam chain that's under this cover here. We'll pull that and I'll show you what that looks like. We've got your cam chain. I'll tip this this motor up so you can see a little bit in the video, and you can see now that cam chain is extremely loose. You might be able to pull that cam chain off that sprocket the way that it sits now. A lot of times what you have to do is pull that, pull this sprocket here, and that looks like it's a 12mm. And you want to make sure your motor doesn't spin over. So what I do is put a finger on a sprocket here. That is way tighter than it needs to be. They are torqued down for sure, but they don't need to be torqued down a bunch. So that bolt is off of there. There is your cam chain sprocket. That pin lines up going back together with that camshaft. There's a hole in that camshaft right there. So that's your sprocket there. We've got 10mm down here. I like to put extension on these when I do this because getting your impact down alongside this head is a challenge. These are torqued down, and I don't have the specs right in front of me right now, but I can get you those. These are tight though, so a lot of times I got to switch from an electric impact to a pneumatic impact. Alright, those are off. These two on this side are off. We've got an oil line that runs down here. I'm just going to pull that oil line completely off right now. Got 10mm. You wouldn't have to just rebuild in the top end. You can kind of pull it enough out, but it's easy enough to remove. Let's just go ahead and remove that so we're not causing any issues there when we go back together. It's in place and ready to go. Got another oil line down here. I'm just going to loosen this bolt while I'm here. These are banjo bolts, meaning oil flows through them. They've got a hole up top here. They've got a hole down the center, and oil will run through those. All right, we've got now the head loose and ready to come off. Your cylinder head bolts, very long bolts here. And there is your cylinder, it's off. And these two bolts will pull out too. A lot of times there's oil from those oil lines that we pulled off. Sometimes there's oil up in these heads. On the bottom side here, we've got your valves, we've got your intake on this side, slightly larger than your exhaust here. Your cam chain obviously runs down in this area. And there is your camshaft right there. To pull this camshaft, 2 Phillips screws, which are right here, and this camshaft will pull out with the bearing, and you may have to kind of move it back and forth like that to get it out of there because your rockers will be resting on top of this camshaft. I like to find top dead center before I pull the motor and rebuild it. That way, going back together, or just pulling off, I guess, your cam chain is in the correct position, or your camshaft is in the right position, meaning it's free here and not putting pressure on those valves, allowing you to pull that camshaft out with no problem. You know what, why don't we do that quick so you have an idea what we're doing there. I like to just set the camshaft, or the cylinder head there, I take a impact driver like this. You want to be really careful. A lot of times I'll take a block of wood or something, set it behind there so you're not steel against aluminum. You can tap on it. It doesn't take a lot of pressure, but these impact drivers here make it extremely easy. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull these Phillips screws. My hands are in the way so you can't really see what I'm doing, but just pulling these two Phillips screws here. And then this piece will pull out of the way. And you can feel there that we've got some movement. What you can do is set your cam chain sprocket bolt back in there. There we go. See, you just kind of have to wiggle it out. When I was pulling it out the first time there, a lobe was actually, and you can maybe see down in there, a lobe was just resting on that cam rocker was resting on that cam lobe, causing it not to pull out. Now to get the rockers out, do the same thing. You can use about any bolt that you can find. I don't like using bolts that I'm going to reuse on the motor, but screw them down in there. And then I'm not going to pull these out right now because, like I said, I don't want, well, easy enough to do, but you just screw any bolt down in there that same size and lift them out. And again, we don't need to do that right now. We're not rebuilding this head. It's in good condition, but it is good to inspect this camshaft. So then going back together, just slide it, kind of wiggle it back and forth in there. You might have to pull these caps off here to so that the lobes are not hitting the rockers. Now going back together, since we were on top dead center, you see your sprocket there. It sits in there, that place like that. So you're going to be, let's see, there's the dot there. Going back together, your lobes are going to be facing down, and that's going to keep your valves, your rockers from hitting the camshaft. This dot's going to be straight up. You can adjust that while it's in there, but you may as well get it close here instead of having your lobes stick up. So your lobes are going to look, it's kind of hard to see when like this, but your lobes are going to be down facing that way, putting it back in like that. So that is the cylinder head on a Bayou. Now we've got your cylinder and your piston. Here's your cam chain. I just kind of let that cam chain drop down in there. I don't like to do that, especially if all we're doing is rebuilding the top end. There is a guide there. You can take a magnet or a pick or something, go down in there, pull that cam chain out. A lot of times might need a longer pick in this case, but we got it here. This is the cylinder head gasket here. You want to make sure you place that every time that you rebuild your motor. And then here's your other guide. You're not going to be able to pull this guide out until you get down into that bottom end. So we have got no more bolts holding this cylinder on. This cylinder is ready to come off. And you can just wiggle it back and forth like that. Take that cam chain, kind of grab it there. You can just kind of lift that cylinder up out of there. Now you've got very, very minimal scoring on here, but there is some wear. We'll probably at least hone this cylinder, but we'll measure it and get it to where it needs to be. This piston, you can feel, if you can feel grooves on this piston, you want to at least bore your cylinder, if not replace it. So this piston here, you can see some grooves. You can't feel them at all. I take my gloves off, run your fingernails over top of it. If it stops or snags at all whatsoever, your piston is grooved and you want to replace it. Now getting your circlip out, you can use a pick. Wherever my pick went, oh, rolled down. And I like to take and stick my pick in the side of that piston there. And then you just pry it out. I put my thumb over top and I try to do this without stabbing myself, but I don't like to see these pistons go, or these circlips go flying across the room. So there's the circlip there, and then you can take and push the piston pin out. A lot of times, especially if there's motor damage, which that's the case on this one, there is crankshaft damage actually. A lot of times these pins are a bit of a challenge to cut out. This one is maybe going to be a really big challenge. I didn't realize that crank was locked up as tight as it was. there it is able to move slightly, which is why this piston and cylinder isn't completely destroyed. If it was locked up completely, a lot of times these pistons will bind in there, causing some major damage. But that's the pin. Circlip slides in there, and the way that I put this back in, obviously the pin's going to be all the way back in. You slide this in, slide it into the groove there with your opening facing away from your mark there. Push it down in there and make sure you can hear it snap. So that is the top end on a Bayou 220. Now we're going to pull this starter, the recoil pull starter, and then we're going to go ahead and pull the stator and flywheel. But first we're going to dig into the clutches here. I'm going to take and set a block so you guys are able to see what I'm working on here. And we've got 8mm bolts all the way around this, and it's still not going to be great for you guys seeing this. But I also need to see it too, so we're going to tip it a little bit this way. All right, there's 11 bolts around the outside. And these you don't actually have to pull, these are just oil filter bolts there. I don't believe there is one underneath here. So we need to pull this to pull the clutch cover. We do need to pull this cover. Here is the oil filter. It's got a HF 123 filter in it. Obviously not going to reuse that, but there is the 8mm down in there that we needed to get out. Oh, we got one up here. And now I lost count where we were. I believe we're somewhere around the 13 range. All right, you know that we got all the bolts out because that cover just kind of started falling off of there. Broke free when we did that. Clutch adjustment is here. I'm gonna pull that cover so you guys know what that looks like. 2 Phillips screws. Your oil fill is here. Your oil check for checking oil level is here. And it's a window, so it's supposed to be between the 2 lines there. And there is your clutch adjust. Now to adjust these, take a 12mm wrench, loosen up the lock nut here, and then you take this screw here. And what I like to do, well, this one might be, well, you know what? We loosen that cover, we're not going to be able to adjust that clutch. Scratch that. If you loosen that cover's not on there all the way, you will be pushing your clutch cover off and doing absolutely nothing to adjusting the clutch. I do have other videos of me adjusting clutches on Bayous, so check those out. There's your clutch cover there. There's your arm that we were starting to adjust, but then didn't. There is your centrifugal clutch is here. That's what they call it, centrifugal clutch. The more throttle you give it, the more it pushes these shoes out, these 3 shoes there, engaging this clutch here. Now, this should spin freely one way, and the other way will spin the entire motor. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure you've got a good one-way bearing in behind this centrifugal clutch. Here is your clutch basket here with the friction and steel plates. I need to grab a couple larger sockets to remove these. Several different sizes, large sockets. I just grabbed a handful of them. This actually we should be using a deep well socket on this. So I need to grab one of those quick. 15/16. And when I'm spinning this over, you want to make very certain that this motor doesn't turn over. So what I do, take something, just be able to push on it with my thumb as we loosen up. That's a regular threaded bolt, so not reverse threaded or anything. Now, what we're going to do is, see there's 2 grooves in this clutch basket. To get this centrifugal clutch off without removing the clutch basket first, you can take, well, you can't remove the clutch basket completely first, but you could loosen the clutch basket and remove them together, or you can line it up with this groove or the groove that's right here. Then you're able just to slide that clutch up that groove. Otherwise, this gear right here, if you were to try to slide it up where there wasn't a groove, you're going to hit that clutch basket there. So here is the one-way bearing that I was telling you about. You want to inspect that, make sure it's in really good condition. It'll spin fairly easily with fingers or anything turning, but the other direction you want to make sure it's sticking. Now we're going to pull the clutch basket apart. We've got 4 10mm bolts there. Again, you want to make sure it doesn't spin. You want to make sure when you're removing these, I didn't do it as good as I should, but make sure you go in a crisscross pattern and loosen them up just slightly at a time. That way they're not putting a ton of pressure on each side of that plate. You can potentially break off these aluminum posts here or break your holder there. All right, we've got another, I believe this one's a 22mm bolt in there, or a nut. Again, take and hold it. Use my thumb, hold against the post there. Spin that off. Let me know if you need torque values on these bolts there. Now you're able to pull that clutch off completely. I then take the springs and that plate, set it back on there, and just kind of snug everything up. Keeps everything together. There's a lot of plates, steel plates there, and friction plates, and if you don't put them back together, they can kind of fall all over the place. Now on this, I had somebody just ask me about this. You've got to take and put pressure down on this plate to get these bolts started. And if you have a tool that looks like this, it makes it very easy. Just put a 10mm on a screwdriver, and then you're able just to put pressure down and start screwing those at the same time. Once you get them started, it's easy, you'll figure it out. There is your clutch pack there. This comes off, sits off behind that clutch pack, and we've got your shift mechanism here. We've got your oil pump here, balancer gear here. So we can pull this balancer gear. That nut is off of there.